like to start this panel off by asking a question. What events, tragedies, and people symbolize evil? Adolf Hitler certainly comes to mind, a man whose ideas led to World War and the murder of 6 million Jews, along with 20 million civilians, many of which he considered to be subhuman. Today, when you mention Adolf Hitler's name or Nazism, many people will make the connection between those terms and consider them synonymous with evil. So it begs the question today as to why men such as Mao Zedong, Joseph Stalin, or Pol Pot, including their ideology of Marxism, receives relatively free pass when it comes under scrutiny. A seemingly benign philosophy that spouts the idea of from each according to his ability to each according to his needs has been responsible for more death and misery than Nazism many times over. Now, this is a cause for concern as Neo-Marxism is an underlying component of critical race theory, an ideology that has captured our institutions, resurrected racist practices, while all the while doing nothing to help the minorities it claims to care so much about. Its underlying ideas must be recognized for what they are before it can be named and shamed. And today we're joined by three unique individuals who have studied, lived, have unique experiences under Marxism that will help them, that make them uniquely qualified to advise us in this current cultural war. Our first speaker is Mr. Ken Pope, a senior fellow at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, with a 34-year career in the U.S. Army, having served in assignments in Europe, the Middle East, and Central America. Our next speaker is Channy Laux, a survivor of the Cambodian genocide, and was 13 years old when the Khmer Rouge took over the country in 1975. She now works with schools and other organizations to help promote awareness of the Cambodian genocide. And her memoir, I believe, is available in one of the booths over there. Oh, it's right over here, wonderful. And Mike Zhao is the founding president of the Asian American Coalition for Education, which has mobilized Asian communities to support students for fair admissions, lawsuits against Harvard and UNC. And he is a survivor of China's Cultural Revolution, advocating against radical liberal agendas. He also has a book, my apologies.
But I did not bring with me this time.
Okay, so my first question is just all three of you. We can decide who wants to start. Well, from reading the accounts of communist regimes from China, Cambodia, to Russia and others, we know that the youth were a very potent resource in bringing Marxist leaders to power. A grade school through young teens were recruited into Mao Zedong's Red Guard, and it wasn't uncommon to see children as young as 12 to be in charge of work camps within Cambodia. When it comes to spreading Marxist ideology, why is it that the youth are such a driving force in subverting the current cultural paradigm and replacing it with a Marxist structure?
Okay, I'll go first. I think a lot of it, if you think about the history of this, it's the communist regimes recognized early on that the most susceptible to this type of ideology or any type of ideology are children, because they really don't have a foundation about what the cost and benefit analysis might be of these ideologies they're hearing for the first time. It sounds attractive, you know, we can make all this world a great, equal, loving place. And oh, by the way, I'm going to give you the power as a young teen of life and death over those who disagree with you. That's very attractive to those people. And if you look at some of the organizations or the leaders that we mentioned there, Mao's Cultural Revolution, Stalin, Pol Pot and the Cambodian killing fields, they weaponized children against their parents, against their teachers, against local officials, against anybody who stood against them. And they were the worst of the worst because they had no foundation about what really is right or wrong. As a person who's been in combat, in Iraq, one of the things I feared most was running against kids for that very reason, because they have no idea either the consequences of their actions or the idea of life and death. They don't get it. That's why they become very effective in these regimes, and that's why these regimes use them. There's a whole mythology in the Soviet era about kids who would turn in their parents and would be called heroes after that, because they turned them in. Their parents were executed in some cases, sent to the gulag in some cases. All for this higher ideology that they think was going to bring about a better world that never did. Always brought, one thing it always was guaranteed to bring was death, destruction, and oppression. And that's what it delivered in spades everywhere it was tried.
So definitely the same kind of thing happened in Cambodia. And I would add to what Ken said, is that they think they're helping. They didn't see themselves as evil. They're helping their parents by turning their parent in. You know, the Khmer Rouge will tell them that your parent had been corrupted by capitalism. You need to help us to help them. So, but you know, everything what Ken said, and I'll try to give you a specific example in Cambodia. You know, this idea of everything equal, no more suffering. It's caught on fire to a lot of high school students. This has happened right before the Khmer Rouge took over the country. There was high school students and teachers. Some high school student in my town was get involved in this riot, and my brother was one of them. And you know, they did similar thing that I see on TV a couple of years ago. You know, destroys business, set things on fire right in that small town that we lived in. But right after the Khmer Rouge took over, guess who they targeted? It was the teachers. And because they fear that when the reality come in, when the truth come in, the same person that was supporting them will be up challenging them. So the teacher was the first to go. First was the serviceman and woman, and next was the teacher, and even some of the high school students. And my family would have to lower our status, lie to them what grade my brother was, so my family would not get in trouble. And when I say target, it doesn't mean that your life is hard. They actually took you away, and you took to be re-educated, and you never returned to your family. And the next thing they do, they starting to recruit the new leader. And guess who the new leader is? So 18 years old, 9 years old to 14 years old. And they're able to do this so quick. I mean, within months, they're able to do this because the very first thing they took over the country, they evacuated us from our town, our village, break us from people that we know. And then the next thing is because we're away from our home, our town, we have no way of supporting ourselves. So we are 100% depending on them for food. And they sure did control us. Not that food doesn't exist in Cambodia during that time, but they control us. They give us ration, and eventually my family got a ration of like 1 tablespoon of rice per person per day. And this go on for months. And next, they come over and helps the children, help the 8 years old to 14 years old, took them to be cared, to be fed, to be educated. And then, you know, the family, that's how the children really, you know, follow them. That age when you have starved, you almost die, you see your family go through all this trauma, they easily confuse love with food. And that's how they specifically, methodically happen in Cambodia.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me? Okay, good. So I think the Mars is a very good question. The simple answer is okay. Many youths, you know, have not developed well-balanced, you know, thinking. They tend to support any kind of idea or policies. Its stating purpose is for the good, but without examining the real results, without having balanced view. You know, I want to share with you what happened in communist China, right? The leaders, the founders of communist China were influenced by former Soviet Union. They sent the delegation to China to set up the Communist Party in 1921. All the leaders, communist early leaders, are young, you know, intellectual elites of China. So that's because they are very zealous. They totally, you know, followed all the propaganda of former Soviet Union. So they using the violent revolution to get power. That is the first stage. Again, when they actually took the power in 1962, Chairman Mao launched a nationwide indoctrination of the Karl Marx class struggle theory. So they basically, in 1962, they published called the People's Education magazine, published one article claim, your love to your mother, your parents, your sisters, brothers is not as good as your love to your class, right? So it's to the party leaders. So that changed everything. So within 5 years, after all the Chinese youth, high schoolers, primarily elementary schools, all is middle schoolers basically, and they in 1966, when Chairman Mao launched the Cultural Revolution, he was able to mobilize over 10 million youth, make them into radicals, who destroyed our over 3,000 years culture, who tortured millions of people and murdered almost, I believe, also in the millions. But my father was one victim being tortured, by this kind of revolution youth. So, again, good question. Because the passion to have a better society, but without a good critical balanced thinking, youth can be easily targeted by this kind of radical ideology.
Well, Marxism primarily deals with class struggles, but with regards to critical race theory, the neo-Marxist thinkers in Ernesto Laux and Chantal Mouffe wanted to reinvigorate Marxism for the modern era by replacing class conflict between the middle and working classes with a struggle based on race. The focus would be on toxic identity politics. And needless to say, we've seen the effects of this new struggle based on the chilling of our intellectual discourse, culminating most recently in the worst possible way on October 7th. But this kind of division is not uncommon amongst rising Marxism. So one of the commonalities we see in past Marxist movements is the need to divide, the need to create enemies, to remove obstacles to power. You all have either studied or experienced this division. Can you describe for us your experiences in the past and how they parallel those in the present?
I think if you look at the past, as this whole thing got started with communism, when the First Nations, with Lenin and Russia at the time becomes the Soviet Union. So it was all about class. They divided these groups, pitted them against each other, promised the one group you're going to do far better under this new Bolshevik regime, and it didn't happen. 7 million dead later, you have a communist nation, first one ever, and it never got any better. And it was put in place by violence, and it maintained power through violence. Stalin, most people don't realize this, was the People's Commissar for Nationalities. And what he did, kind of ingenious in his sick way, was he took various national groups, nationalities, and interspersed them among their rivals, other ethnic groups. Think about the Balkans. Think about specifically the Caucasus and former Soviet Union. In each one of these nations, they intermixed the populations and then started emphasizing all of these racial, ethnic divides. And what do you have? That place is still a mess. Nagorno-Karabakh, still a war. Georgia, you have all these little separatist republics there. It's kind of a microcosm of what they do all over the world. My experience in the Balkans was the same thing. You go there, they emphasize in this former communist nation all of the differences between groups. And what do you have? Mass slaughter. And we got to sit there and watch for decades, thinking it was going to end, and it just didn't. And we do that here to our own detriment. We divide ourselves by class, by race, or whatever. The military used to be very good about that. You come into the military as a young man in basic training, the first thing they literally beat out of you is any notion of individuality, race, tribe, or ethnic group. They don't care, because they know that a unit that is divided by these premises are going to fail, they're going to die in combat. And we always do. Why? And I don't understand why we think as a nation that we're going to fare any better doing that to ourselves here. It doesn't work that way. I would say, come with me, I'll take you some very big mass graves in Kosovo or Bosnia and other places that I got to visit, because people didn't believe that. And again, I think as John mentioned last night, we Americans are very arrogant. We think nothing bad can happen here. I think that's a fool's errand. Things can very rapidly get bad here if we allow it to happen. If we continue to divide ourselves along these lines and hate each other, it's not going to end well.
So in Cambodia, when that happened, I was already 13 years old, and I understand right and wrong. We don't have TV, but I read a lot of newspaper, and I learned that this opposition to the current government kind of makes sense. As a 13 years old, I look at my father and I said, they might be right, because I feel guilty because my father, every day he's working and he never breaks a sweat. And to them, they pitch between rich and poor. But then, at the same time, my father grew up in a poor family. He never got a chance to go to school, because back then in Cambodia, if you go to school, you had to pay, so it's not like a free school sponsor, Anyway, he never got to school because my grandfather, his father was a refugee escaping communist China. He went from China to Cambodia to try to find a better life for his family, for his futures. And because of that, my father had to help his parents put food on the table. But eventually he was able to work himself out of that poverty, and right before the communists took over, he owned a business of import-export from Cambodia to Singapore, to Vietnam, and to Thailand. And he had a lot of people working for him. And ever since I know right from wrong, I never had to experience what he had to experience. I live in a household that most people would call here privileged. Right? In 1975, our house had a refrigerator. We have cars, and that is rare in Cambodia during that time. But as soon as the communists came over, they confiscated all the hard work that he put in. It didn't matter that he started from poor to rich. In fact, he threatened them because he is the opposite of their narrative. He showed the progress. He gave hope to people who poor that they're trying to control. That they would love to have us believe that if you're poor, you'll stay poor forever. The only way to get out of it is to follow our movement, right? So what happened then after they took over the country? Cambodia would say, everything turned upside down. The poor become a leader, your worker become your boss, and you become the slave. And eventually, after like 2 years under the communists, some of the peasants, some of the workers would start complaining. They said, well, at least in the old regime, I have new clothes every year. They start to complain about different things. We don't, because, if you ever complain, you get in trouble. But they are the leader, they still complain, because basically what it does, the communists, when they say everybody equal, that it's not equal. It's equal for all the people, and everybody lower in quality of life. Everybody poor. So that's how you're equal, And they also, it's funny how the peasant would, the first rainy season, we're working with them. I never have experience in the farm, but they were upset because to them it's not fair. They work fast and we work slow. How come they have to stay as long as we do? See, there's no equal, never equal. And they realize, but it's too late. And what happened, I see what happened in this country, and people had come to me, why you don't believe in, liberal or socialist? And I said, because I've been through all that. But I don't fit into the narrative. In this country, it's white versus others. I hate it, I really hate it when they said, first they used to say Black American, right? Then they go color. It's like, don't put me in there. I'm not part of it. Don't blanket, this. It should be individual. And I believe that that's how we fight back, is when we are strong, when we teach our children to be responsible, believe in individual contribution, that individual can change, that's how we get strong, that's how we fight back. And I know they're going through changing our young students, but I don't, we don't give up. If we give up, we lose for sure. And where am I gonna go? My grandfather escaped from China for communism.
Channy, we have to move on. Can I have
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the question is very good. Actually, as early as 2020, when I saw the Black Lives Matter movement, the top-down or funding for the station, I called it America's Cultural Revolution. Okay, already started. I call the critical race theory is a Karl Marx class struggle theory 2.0. So I call the Karl Marx critical race theory as Karl Marx class struggle theory 2.0, right? They're using similar approach. They divide innocent people into oppressors and oppressed, right? In Chinese Cultural Revolution, the Red Guard even categorized Chinese people into so-called 5 red categories, including workers, tenants, poor and middle income peasants, revolutionary soldiers, revolutionary cadres, revolutionary mortals. But they also categorize like landlords and affluent peasants, anti-revolutionaries, criminals, and rightists as 5 black categories. People belong to 5 black categories are deprived their personal assets. They were some even murdered. Every time they have class struggle sections, they were being criticized, tortured, and also they have no chance to go to college, no career advancement. Similar thing is happening in America, right? Like affirmative action. If you happen to be born in a white or Asian family, you will be limited to go to college. The so-called many woke diversity issues, setting racial quotas, try to denounce the try to destroy meritocracy. It is in a less degree, not as bad as that. So I think it is great similarity, between what happened in communist China or other communist nation, and to what's happening in America.
Well, the 3 of you may recognize the indoctrination coming into our K-12 schools, but the average layman may not be so keen. We know that there were many symbols used within the Marxist movements in the 1960s that are showing up in materials used to promote liberated ethnic studies today. Everyone is familiar with the upraised fist that's used in the posters for BLM, for instance. The same fist shows up in a flyer called, I believe it's The Hand That Will Rule the World, which still happens to be displayed in the posters representing the California Teachers Association. We know that the 1960s Black Panther movements had trained with the PLO in Algeria in return for their ideas, with their leader, Huey Newton, stating that, and I quote, "America must die so that civilization might live," while framing America as an oppressive power and Vietnam as the oppressed, a similar paradigm to what we see today. So I think only those who've lived in both eras, the 1960s and now, can really make that connection between the past and what's appearing in our current educational system. So have you seen these symbols appear with similar narratives in your home countries? Are these what we need to look out for? What other aspects should the general public be aware of to notice liberated ethnic studies being active?
Maybe I can start. I saw not only similar symbols. I want to tell you the word woke we already had 50, 60 years ago. If somebody be indoctrinated following Karl Marx in the class struggle theory, that person in Chinese called have 觉悟, okay? In English is woke, okay? So it's already great similarity.
Hello. So the symbol that it really gets to my heart, and whenever I see it, I look at a family I lost. My happy time before the communists took over, all of that come back, and it's not so much the fist, but also the hammer and sickle. But when I saw the fist, the first time that really repulsed me was two blocks away from my restaurant right now. It's in San Jose State campus. If you ever get a chance to walk by, there's a fist, a statue of a fist right in the middle of courtyard, bigger than me, twice as big. It's just right in the middle of it. And I was like, this is San Jose State. This is where all the refugees come in, from Vietnam, from Cambodia, from China. And why are we putting this in the middle of our city? And then the other thing, I don't know if you noticed, last night, what I saw on TV was our Vice President Harris, when she was talking, right in the podium was a fist. Did you guys notice that? That's insult. That's to me, because I've been through, I see it. I see it. Maybe you guys don't see it. After a while, you're used to it. But I saw it. Go back and check. There was a fist, but it hold on to a cross. But it's still a fist to me. So I'm sorry. It just, that's what I see. It's happening here.
I think it's very emblematic of those societies. I mean, if you look at the 60s, if you look at my area is the Soviet Union. That's the area I kind of grew up in and studied a lot. But you look at the symbolism was everywhere. You couldn't escape it. Everywhere you went. From the time you woke up in the morning, the radio came on. You were hearing some slogan. There's a colleague of ours that we work with, Channy and I, Marina. She would tell us, living in Ukraine, she'd wake up every morning to the radio, and they'd have to do their little daily calisthenics, salute the radio, and all this other stuff. And the radio came on whether you wanted to or not. It wasn't something you controlled. Symbolism was any sporting event you went to. It was any place you went in the store, there would be a sign behind there, work as the world unite, whatever the slogan was. And I see that today as a former college professor. I'd be walking around campus and I would see these most ridiculous t-shirts that these students are wearing. I saw one that had, it was like the whole cast of heroes. You had Lenin, you had Stalin, you had Marx, you had Mao. I'm not sure Pol Pot was on there, all wearing party hats, looking like these cool party guys. My personal pet peeve was Che Guevara walking around campus. I'd see that shirt. I would always grab the kids and say, hey, who's on that shirt? Anybody want to tell me, of all the kids I asked over about 3.5 years, how many actually knew who that person was on the shirt? Not a single one. Not one kid knew who it was. So all the slogans and everything else, the narrative you see, it's coming out today. I mean, you see it as Channy's talking about. We see it. The BLM posters were kind of ubiquitous in DC for people who didn't want their windows kicked in. They put a sign up, and that was kind of their protection, I think, in a lot of cases. You look at a football game today. Look at the end zone. What's written on the back of the end zone? There's some type of political slogan there, or some type of slogan period. And I think that's kind of dangerous. We become a society that lives by and does policy by slogans, and that mean nothing really. And that's part of our education system today too, is where a lot of what is discussed and what's thrown out there, there's no critical thinking going on to kind of understand what does that really mean, and do I really support that? And if so, why do I support it? I challenge you to find an answer to that, especially from some of our kids in K-12 or even at the university level that can actually answer that question.
That's actually the perfect segue to my next question, because there's a really interesting debate going out that I really like your perspective on. The debate is, this is something I hear from time to time, as to whether or not we should replace liberated ethnic studies with something more holistic and honest instead of cutting it out completely. I was speaking at a school meeting discussing liberated ethnic studies in which there were instances of people speaking about how, in many cases, there's no one general story that can describe the entirety of the experience of a single community. And that anyone who claims to speak on behalf of an entire community is displaying a colossal level of arrogance. Given the complexities of some of these narratives and that liberated ethnic studies teaches history on an extremely selective basis, I don't think there's much to be gained here except for divisiveness. And if we truly want to take this issue responsibly, the current approach should be dropped and another angle should be taken. So I'd like to ask this panel if there is any value in teaching ethnic studies within the current approach, whether through liberated ethnic studies or through other healthier alternatives. Now, given your cultural backgrounds, I'd like to hear from all of you about your take on this debate.
I actually, a couple months ago, was approached by American Cambodian ethnic study. And, you know, I thought it was great. Oh, good, you know. I can see the benefit of some Cambodian community that has strong Cambodian would appreciate that. Their children will learn about a little bit about their culture. And, but I think just by, you know, signing up to be part of this discussion, I start to realize, oh shoot, you know, we don't really know what it's all about. And because of that, I had signed up to give a talk during this American Cambodian ethnic study. I submit a proposal, and in my talk it's going to be what happened to the Cambodian genocide and who's actually is the cause of it, what ideology created all that suffering, and I will be there. So I don't think, to me, I think if we said, you know, let's remove it and fight to remove whatever is already mandated, we will have a lot of Cambodian and ethnic family who didn't understand would say, this is no good. Why are you doing this, right? So I think the best thing to do is to participate, is to stay close. And don't even look at the title only. Don't look at the description only. Go to each one of them and listen to what they say. And we need to provide resource and support to teachers who doesn't really look at this eye to eye and really agree with them, but they may not know. And by the time they know, they need support from us. So I actually create a Cambodian Genocide Resource Center, an organization that provides support to teachers who want to teach about Cambodian genocide. We provide speakers, we provide curriculum for age appropriate from K. Right now we finish high school, but our next goal is to work on junior high. So I think we need to support teachers. We cannot be there all the time, but we need to have the material and support teachers when they wanted to teach. They shouldn't be on their own.
Yeah, I guess absolutely we need ethnic study, but unfortunately today's ethnic study pretty much is a plot by the radical left, like organizations like the Union, they are real, you know, behind, try to destroy like the American culture, the fabric of this country, right? They confuse many things. For example, you know, they emphasize indigenous communities, the minorities. Yes, they are respectful. However, you know, it is our Americans' founding father. It's all the, you know, the free market system, rule of law, this kind of civilization, modern civilization, really advance our modern society, right? So they try to pick Americans' historical wrongdoings, try to blame, you know, try to destroy the whole American culture. That is the motive of the cultural Marxism, right? And in order to defeat that, I have two suggestions. You know, in the ethnic study, we need, number one, need a comparative study. You know, before I came to America, I knew, even today, many immigrants, you know, people of color waiting in line in the American embassy, try to come to America, because America is the best country in the world in terms of human rights, everything, right? So, but, you know, when we come here, this kind of ethnic study portray America as worst. That is not fair. America, previously, British really was the first to abolish slavery, right? America took the leadership in the civil rights movement. So we need, have a comparative study show America is really the best as number one. Number two, we also need to draw a line. The line is between the history and today. Historically, America has slavery like many other nations, right? But it is a civil rights movement already abolished that. After civil rights movement, there's no law, discriminate against black and other, people of color. Actually, it is really the affirmative action other laws discriminate against white, against Asians, right? And also another thing we also want, teach people per individual success have two aspects. One is your individual efforts, another is societal issue. We should not confuse the two, right? If say America is a society, predominated by white privilege, why not white people, but the Asian Americans are regarded as a highest income, best educated racial group, right? So we need really a well-balanced ethnic study. We need really, denounce the currently, cultural Marxism motivated, that kind of manipulated, ethnic study.
I think to me the value would be getting away from the topics that tend to divide us. We're emphasizing the ethnic differences in a lot of these cases as opposed to what we all came here for. My family's a family of immigrants like most people in the room. We came here to be an American. Like mythology, my family's the Irish saved the world. Well, I know that's BS. We really didn't. The country that I'm in now, my family came here for a reason because it offered something that is unique in the world. I've had the privilege of, sometimes not a privilege, of living, working, or fighting in about 65 different countries around the world. And there's nothing like this anywhere on the planet. And I would tell my students, whether you want to believe this or not, you've won life's lottery. You are blessed to be in this nation. And we need to start emphasizing that as opposed to what is different about us. We can talk about our history, warts and all. I have no problem with that. We've done a lot of great things. We've done some pretty awful things as well. Every nation has. We have a system in place or a form of government that allows us to self-correct. It's called elections every year, every other year. It seems like every year. But that's how we get around it. That's how we improve. That's how we change. And we forget that. Instead, a lot of these ethnic studies, as I've seen them, they do just the opposite. It's condemning. It's by virtue of you're a young black person, therefore you're oppressed. You have no hope. You're a young white person or brown person or whatever. You're part of the oppressor, so you're inherently evil. You have no hope. I think that's a sick way to approach kids. Point blank. There's a better way, and it's emphasizing what is great about the country, talk about the past, but we don't dwell on just negative stuff all the time. We emphasize the positive of all these different groups that make our nation what it is today, an American nation. There's a reason there's a huge line getting in this country, trying to get in this country. They're trying to get out, and I've seen that over the years. People come here for a reason. I've had calls literally. Just a very short story. A colleague of mine from Estonia, this guy was in a Soviet labor camp 4,000 miles from his home in Estonia, condemned because he would not sing the Soviet song when he was graduating basic training. Escaped twice from this prison camp. And he called me one morning, probably 2 o'clock his time. He was watching our country implode during 2020. And he said, "What are you guys doing to yourselves? Don't you know that if you guys fall, there's nowhere else to go on this planet?" So if these guys can get it, I don't know why we can't. So I would just say that's where I would leave it.
I just want to add really quick. When I think about this, sometimes it's against what we believe, against what we came here for as a refugee, is the term American melting pot. It's just opposite of it, and that's scary.
Okay, we're running short on time, so I'd like to take some audience questions. Just have some parameters to go through first. Keep your questions short and to the point, no life stories, and have at it. But Naya?
Laux here. Thank you. Okay. So Hello? Okay, hi. All right, so thank you so much for this panel. I kind of want to respectfully push back on ethnic studies. I wear several hats, one of which is a teacher. And last night we heard from a panel of people who basically said that the panacea against this is classical education. Classical education doesn't have ethnic studies. I actually think there's only X amount of hours in a day. My students cannot write a complete sentence. There are run-ons, there's no subordinate clauses sometimes, there's no proper use of punctuation, they cannot articulate an argument. So we have to think carefully. Ethnic studies takes time away, number one. Number two, I just don't think I'm sorry, I'd rather they know geography, classical texts. So I actually think what we should be doing is actually advocating to not have any form of ethnic studies. I know it's not a popular opinion, but I just wanted to voice that as both a teacher and somebody who, somebody who writes about this issue as well. So that's what I wanted to say.
No, I think I'm going to say within the context of, it should be done just in the context of history or world history. I don't understand why we have to have a separate language.
I believe it should be in college, not in the K-12, as some selective is, it's not really or part of history or very brief. I agree.
So I look at it as a refugee myself, and I agree with you, and I agree with Mike that it should be a field in college. Our children is like our school, our student is like our children. If we have animosity among parents, we protect them until they get older. So but I felt like they already out there. They already mandate it. It's water under the bridge, so we have to get close to them. You don't think so?
No, I think we need to stray away from that attitude that you can't go back and change it. I think if we all here decide no, ethnic studies has to go, AB 101, which mandated, was wrong. I mean, I think most of us in this room will agree on that. Then the focus needs to be to reverse that.
If we can reverse it, I'm with you. I didn't know that. Yeah.
I think it's.
Excuse me. Please let the guest. Please let the host finish her statement.
What I'm saying, from the Cambodian community, and I'm sure there's other ethnic community, they see this. Like I see it, maybe it's not bad. So it's not clear, right? And I also think that I think that if we fight it to say get away from it, just don't stop mandating us, you're gonna get a lot of people have good intention, misunderstood, and pointing finger at you. So, but I also didn't know that once it's on mandate, you can reverse it. So, but if you have a way to fight for this, I'm with you. I'm behind you.
This lady over here.
Is there a microphone coming? No. If so, okay. Otherwise, I would just yell. You talked about the similarities in what's happening and what you've experienced in other countries, but you talked about the similarities, and people always talk about, oh, Marxism, it's coming, and these are the similarities. And I see the similarities, but what's the end game? Like, how do we get from here to where other countries? Like, I feel like that's a huge gap that people don't explain, and I honestly don't understand it. Do you understand my question?
Yes, I think it is a very good question. What is end game if we allow this kind of indoctrination happening, okay? All the nation, if they implement indoctrination, people will no longer have independent thinking. And that will lead to one-party system, will lead to authoritarian, system. So that is very dangerous. China, like a former Soviet Union, Cuba, all the, Nazi Germany, right? All the people, all the countries already experienced that. So that's the reason, we have been all of us started fighting against indoctrination. We need freedom of speech. We need, independent thinking of all citizens.
To me, there's almost every aspect of our life that we enjoy, and sometimes a lot of them we took for granted. When you allow this to happen, for example, many times when I came here, I received welfare help from government. As soon as I can, I get out of it. Even before we reach limit, my family and I go clean houses, clean yards, and we want that freedom to control our destiny. So what happened in America, government always, in other words, handout, right? When we receive the handout from government, we actually allow the government decide what to do next. And what happened is the handout. I have handout during the Khmer Rouge. The first month when we were there, we got everything we wanted. You know, I mean, not everything we want. We got full stomach. That lasts only 1 month or 1 week, and then it kept reducing. So every time I see the government handout, it's about control. Handout will eventually become ration, and they can ration even if they have it. They control you. They won't give it to you. So that's one thing I see. People happy to receive support from government. I didn't even like support from President Trump when he did some kind of handout during the pandemic. I said, leave us alone. We can deal with this. That's one example.
Next question, I believe the gentleman over here.
Yep.
Yeah. This will be our last one. We're running short of time.
Okay, well, quickly I'd like to ask 2 questions. So I'll be one with regards to China. China had a civilization of, and I've asked this to Chinese students, but they never give me a clear answer. So I'll ask you. Several thousand years of high civilization, great culture, generating technology, yet a foreign ideology by a German who couldn't even pay his own rent was able to be imposed into China and still dominates today. How did that happen? My second question for the speaker for Cambodia.
We're running short of time, so unfortunately we only have one.
All right, I'll ask you later.
Okay, so basically I tell you my personal perspective. China's civilization, have evolved to the height in Song Dynasty about 1,000 years ago. That time we have a civil government. Even the defense ministry is a civil, is not a general, right? A lot of good civilization. That time the GDP average, per capita is the highest. Mongol conquered China, unfortunately, and bring all the authoritarian, and also in Chinese history also have elements called legalism, also have dictatorship. We have Confucius and legalism. That's kind of Confucius emphasized the government for the people, and Song Dynasty was built upon that. So, but ever since that, China never evolved into the Western, modern civilization, check and balance, limit of power, right, of the government. Never have free rule of law. So when China was declining in the 20th century, at that time, Chinese intellectuals suddenly tried to find a solution. Suddenly find the Karl Marx maybe a good solution. So they jump on that, and then so actually Karl Marx theory destroyed China, not only the economy, also the cultural revolution, right? So they did most damage to our civilization than anybody else.
So I would just say too that if you look at this, the history of communism, it doesn't happen by accident. It's imposed on society. And if you look at what Karl Marx said, the closing line of one of the closing lines, one that's never really mentioned, workers of the world unite, everybody remembers that one. What it doesn't see is that in that same paragraph, that closing paragraph, what they're calling for is the forcible overthrow of all societal conditions. So it's not just the economy, it's every aspect of your society. It's the destruction of all the old to replace it with something new, no matter where it's tried. And it always ends badly. There's 100 million victims and counting.
So in Cambodia, it's small compared to China, but all that happened because It's not that, people like my dad said, oh, things like this won't happen in Cambodia because Cambodia is self-sufficient. It needs to happen in China because at the time it goes through famine and all that. And, but look what happened. And they're able to do that because they control us. The first thing they did, they confiscated gun from the former regime soldier, and the next thing is food. And when you're hungry, when you're tired, when you're seeing your family dying around, fighting back is not even an option. And that's how they control you. Fear, food, and humiliation. Can you imagine all those men watching their kid and their wife dying in front of them? They could have done something, right? So, controlling.
We're out of time, but I'd like to take this moment to thank our panel for offering their perspectives. Thank you.